Imagine for a moment that every emotion you feel is a compass pointing you toward truth. If that were the case, life would be simple. You'd wake up feeling anxious and know immediately. This means something bad is coming. You'd feel excited and know. This means I should go after this opportunity. You'd feel angry and know. This person must be in the wrong. But here's the problem: emotions are not always compasses. Often, they're more like funhouse mirrors, distorting reality, magnifying certain things while shrinking others, making you believe that what you feel is what's true. And this is where so many of us fall into a trap. We assume that because we feel something, it must be real. We mistake emotions for facts. We mistake moods for meaning. We mistake impulses for wisdom. And when we do that, we suffer. Emotions are some of the most powerful forces we experience as human beings. They can completely shape the way we see the world, how we treat others, and even how we see ourselves. When you're happy, life feels lighter. When you're anxious, the smallest tasks seem impossible. When you're angry, everything looks like a fight. And when you're sad, the world feels like it has lost its color. The intensity of emotions makes them incredibly convincing. They feel so real, so urgent that we often mistake them for truth itself. If you feel fear, your brain tells you that danger must be near. If you feel insecure, you assume everyone around you is judging you. If you feel angry, you automatically believe someone has wronged you. This is the trap. We assume that because we feel something, it must be accurate. But emotions are not truths. They are signals. They are flashes of information, quick bursts of energy meant to get your attention. And like any signal, sometimes they are accurate, and sometimes they are false alarms. Think about how many times you have felt something intensely only to discover later that it wasn't true. Maybe you were convinced a friend was ignoring you, and you felt hurt or rejected only to find out later they were just busy. Maybe you felt sure that a challenge at work would end in disaster, and you spent days stressing, but in reality, it turned out fine. Or maybe you were infatuated with someone and swore it was love, but a few months later realized it was more about your loneliness than about them. In each of these cases, the emotions felt real, but they weren't reliable guides to reality. That's the nature of emotions. They exaggerate, they distort, and they often reflect old wounds or fears more than they reflect what's actually happening right now. The reason emotions can't be fully trusted is because they evolved to keep us alive, not necessarily to keep us happy or wise. Fear, for example, is one of the oldest survival emotions. It helped our ancestors avoid predators or dangerous situations. But in modern life, fear often gets triggered by things that aren't life-threatening at all. Public speaking, meeting new people, or making mistakes at work. The fear still feels real, but the threat isn't. Similarly, anger evolved as a defense mechanism to protect us from being wronged or exploited. But today it might erupt just because someone disagrees with our opinion online. The emotion is powerful, but the situation doesn't actually require the reaction. Emotions also come from past experiences. If you grew up feeling criticized, you might still feel defensive even when no one is attacking you. If you were betrayed once, jealousy may arise even in a healthy relationship. The emotion is a signal, but it doesn't mean the present moment matches the past. Without reflection, we mistake those emotional echoes for truth. This is why it's dangerous to treat emotions as facts. They are not objective descriptions of reality. They are subjective experiences shaped by your biology, your memories, your environment, and even your current energy level. You might feel worthless after one rejection, but that doesn't mean you actually are worthless. You might feel like quitting after a failure, but that doesn't mean success isn't possible. The real power comes when you start to see emotions as data, not destiny. They are pieces of information your mind and body send to you, but they are not commands. Anxiety might be telling you that something matters to you deeply, not that you're doomed to fail. Anger might be telling you that your boundaries are being crossed, not that you should explode. Sadness might be telling you that you value connection, not that life is hopeless. When you treat emotions as signals, you can pause, interpret, and then decide what to do. This shift is what allows you to respond thoughtfully instead of reacting blindly. Emotions will always show up, but you get to decide how much authority you give them. If you build your life on emotions alone, you will never find stability because emotions are not steady. They change constantly. One moment you feel unstoppable, and in the next moment you can feel paralyzed by doubt. If you rely on those shifting feelings to guide your decisions, your path will look like chaos, zigzagging, inconsistent, and without direction. Imagine waking up one day feeling motivated and setting a huge goal for yourself, only to abandon it a week later because your motivation faded. Or picture committing to a relationship because you feel excited in the beginning, then running away as soon as things get difficult because excitement has turned into discomfort. Living this way means you never finish what you start, you never commit long enough to see results, and you never grow beyond your moods. So many people unknowingly live in this cycle. They believe they must wait until they feel ready to take action, or they stop the moment things don't feel good anymore. They confuse comfort with truth. The gym feels hard, so they say it must not be for them. A difficult conversation feels awkward, so they avoid it. Sticking to a long-term goal feels boring at times, so they drop it. This reliance on emotion becomes a prison where nothing meaningful is ever achieved, because meaningful things require consistency through discomfort. Emotions are like weather, sunny one day, stormy the next. If you let them decide where you go, you'll never travel far. Think about success in any area: building a career, writing a book, training your body, or even sustaining love. None of these happened because people felt motivated every day. They happened because people kept going despite how they felt. A professional athlete doesn't wake up excited for every practice. A writer doesn't sit at the desk every morning with inspiration flooding in. A partner in a long-term relationship doesn't always feel butterflies. What separates them from the average person is that they didn't allow emotions to dictate their consistency. They acted on values and commitments, not on fleeting moods. The danger of trusting every emotion is also how it can trick you into self-sabotage. Fear convinces you that quitting protects you, when in reality it only keeps you stuck. Anger tells you to lash out, which often damages relationships more than it protects them. Laziness tells you that rest is deserved, but over time it robs you of progress. By obeying these feelings, you unknowingly choose short-term comfort over long-term growth. And the irony is that the more you give in to every passing emotion, the less control you actually feel over your life. You become a passenger, not the driver, tossed around by whatever mood shows up that day. On the flip side, the people who accomplish great things are not the ones who always feel good. They are the ones who learn to separate feelings from decisions. They might feel nervous, but they still speak up. They might feel lazy, but they still show up. They might feel doubtful, but they still keep working. They don't ignore their emotions. They simply refuse to let those emotions dictate every move. It's like steering a ship. Emotions are the wind, but you still hold the rudder. Some days the wind helps you, some days it pushes against you, but your hands decide where you go. This is why following every emotion creates chaos. It robs you of direction. It keeps you from commitment, and it convinces you to trade progress for temporary relief. Growth, discipline, and fulfillment are built by acting through emotions, not by bowing down to them. If you rely on feelings alone, you will forever remain stuck in the cycle of starting and quitting, loving and doubting, trying and abandoning, never moving forward, always spinning in place. When an emotion hits, it often arrives with such intensity that it feels like the only reality that exists. Fear tells you to run. Anger tells you to fight. Sadness tells you to withdraw. Excitement tells you to jump in head first. The mistake most people make is reacting instantly without ever pausing to question what that emotion is really saying. But emotions are not perfect guides. They are quick judgments based on past experiences and instincts. Questioning them creates a vital space between what you feel and what you do, and that space is where freedom exists. Think of anxiety before a big opportunity. Your chest tightens, your heart races, and your brain says, "You're not ready." If you take that feeling at face value, you'll decline, avoid, or escape. But if you stop and ask, "Is this anxiety telling me the truth or just reflecting my fear of failure?" you suddenly gain perspective. Anxiety might not mean you can't do it. It might simply mean that it matters to you. That pause changes the outcome because you don't react blindly, you respond with awareness. The same is true with anger. Someone says something that feels like an attack, and immediately your body floods with heat, urging you to retaliate. But if you stop for even a few seconds and ask, "If I act on this anger, where will it lead me?" you often realize that exploding won't fix the problem. It will make it worse. Anger can highlight where a boundary exists, but it doesn't always tell you the right way to protect it. That reflection turns a destructive impulse into an opportunity for clarity. Sadness works in a similar way. It whispers that things will never get better, that you should give up, that life has lost meaning. In those moments, the temptation to withdraw or surrender feels almost irresistible. But if you question it, is this sadness a permanent truth, or is it just my mind processing a difficult moment? You start to see that sadness isn't a final verdict. It's a wave passing through. By creating distance, you gain the ability to endure it without letting it define your future. This process of questioning emotions doesn't mean suppressing them. It means acknowledging them as they are, but not assuming they're always accurate. Emotions are like alerts on your phone. Sometimes they point to something urgent that requires immediate attention. Other times they're just background noise, remnants of old fears, insecurities, or habits that don't actually reflect the present. Without questioning, you treat every alert as a crisis. With questioning, you learn to distinguish the signal from the static. Even positive emotions can mislead you if you don't question them. Excitement about a new opportunity can blind you to obvious red flags. Infatuation can convince you to ignore toxic behavior. Overconfidence can push you into reckless choices. Asking, "What would I tell a friend if they were feeling this?" is a powerful way to balance your perspective. You gain distance from the heat of the emotion and see it with clearer eyes. When you pause to question emotions, you stop being a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Instead, you become the one holding the strings. That small moment of reflection, the decision to ask, "What's really happening here?" turns raw emotion into useful information. You're no longer at the mercy of impulses, you're able to navigate them. Emotions are inevitable, but whether they control your life is up to you. Values are what anchor you when emotions try to pull you in every direction. Feelings are temporary, shifting with circumstances, moods, and even the weather, but values remain steady over time. When you rely only on emotions, you live like a boat tossed around by waves, never in control of where you end up. But when you live by values, you become the captain of that boat, steering it regardless of how strong the waves crash against you. This is why values are essential. They provide the foundation and clarity that emotions cannot. Imagine someone who values health. On days when they feel lazy, their emotions scream, stay in bed, skip the workout. If they lived only by emotion, they would constantly abandon their fitness goals. But because their value is health, they push through, even when the feeling isn't there. The same applies to relationships. If loyalty is a value, then even when frustration or anger arises, you don't just walk away. You stay, you work, you repair. Without values, those temporary emotions dictate behavior, and every fight or difficulty could become the end of something meaningful. This is why many people feel lost. They try to live only by what they feel in the moment. They wait until they feel motivated before taking action. They wait until they feel confident before starting something new. They wait until they feel ready before committing. But feelings are unreliable companions. You can't build a meaningful life waiting for emotions to align. Values, however, don't depend on moods. They demand action regardless of how you feel. Discipline, resilience, and growth are built on this principle. Think about the difference between someone guided by emotions and someone guided by values in moments of fear. Fear says, don't take the risk. If you listen, you avoid opportunities. But if your value is courage or growth, you take the step anyway because you know that who you want to become matters more than what you feel right now. Anger says, strike back, prove you're right. If you obey it, you damage trust. But if your value is respect, you choose to respond calmly even though your body screams otherwise. Sadness says, give up, nothing matters. If you surrender, you stop moving. But if your value is perseverance, you keep going, trusting that the feeling will pass, but your purpose will remain. Values are also what keep long-term goals alive. Anyone can start something when emotions are high, writing a book, building a business, committing to a new habit. But only values keep you going when excitement fades and boredom sets in. Emotions don't care about long-term achievement, they care about immediate comfort. But values remind you of the bigger picture, of the kind of life you want to create. They give meaning to struggle, turning discomfort into something worthwhile. Living by values instead of emotions doesn't mean rejecting feelings. It means choosing which emotions align with the person you want to be. Excitement about growth, gratitude for progress, pride in effort, those emotions reinforce values. Fear, laziness, or insecurity still show up, but they don't get to lead. The more you act in alignment with values, the stronger your sense of identity becomes. You stop being someone who waits for emotions to carry you forward and instead become someone who moves forward regardless. Without values, life feels unstable, constantly shifting with moods. With values, life feels grounded even when storms hit. Emotions will always rise and fall, but values provide the direction to keep walking. They remind you that the person you want to become matters far more than the emotion you feel in this moment. Painful emotions are some of the most misunderstood forces in our lives. Most people spend their energy trying to escape them, suppress them, or distract themselves from ever having to feel them. Fear, sadness, anger, guilt, these feelings are uncomfortable, so the instinct is to avoid them at all costs. But the truth is that painful emotions exist for a reason. They are not punishments, they are not curses, they are teachers. They show us parts of ourselves we might ignore, lessons we need to learn, and values we hold deep inside. The problem comes when we treat them as dictators rather than guides. If you obey fear without question, you hide from challenges. If you obey anger without thought, you destroy relationships. If you obey guilt without reflection, you spiral into shame. It is not the emotion itself that harms you, but your unquestioned obedience to it. Fear is one of the clearest examples. On the surface, fear says, run away, don't do this, you're not safe. If you trust that voice blindly, you avoid risks, you miss opportunities, and you stay small. But if you pause and ask what the fear is pointing to, you often discover it highlights what matters most to you. Fear before a big presentation means you care about doing well. Fear before pursuing a dream means you care deeply about that goal. Fear is not always a sign to quit. Often, it's a sign that you are on the edge of growth. By reflecting instead of reacting, you can transform fear from a cage into a compass. Anger functions in a similar way. It rises when you feel wronged, when your boundaries are crossed, or when something violates your sense of fairness. Taken at face value, anger demands an immediate fight, a sharp word, or an act of retaliation. But underneath, anger is often pointing to a truth that something important to you is being overlooked or disrespected. If you explode, you miss the lesson and only cause damage. But if you reflect, you can see the boundary clearly and assert it in a healthy way. Anger is not there to control you, It is there to reveal where you need strength. Sadness also carries wisdom. When we lose someone, when dreams collapse, or when life disappoints us, sadness moves in. It tells us that something we valued has been lost. If you let sadness dictate your actions, you may withdraw from life, give up, or believe nothing will ever change. But if you reflect, you realize sadness is evidence of love, of meaning, of connection. It shows you what truly matters to your heart. Without sadness, joy would lose its depth and love would lose its weight. By listening to sadness as a teacher, you can honor what you value and carry it forward into the future. Even guilt, one of the most uncomfortable emotions, can teach powerfully. On the surface, guilt feels heavy, like a judgment hanging over you. If you obey it blindly, it turns into shame and self-loathing. But guilt is not meant to crush you. It's meant to point out where your actions have strayed from your values. It can guide you back to integrity, to growth, to repairing what was broken. Without reflection, guilt becomes a burden. With reflection, guilt becomes a turning point. The key to all painful emotions is the difference between reacting and reflecting. When you react, the emotion drives the car and takes you wherever it wants, often into regret. When you reflect, you take the wheel, using the emotion as information to guide you instead of control you. Painful emotions are not the enemy. They are signals that something within you needs attention. They are not dictators to obey, but teachers to learn from. Freedom is often misunderstood as the absence of struggle or the constant presence of positive emotions. People imagine that being free means always feeling good, never experiencing fear, anger, or sadness, and living in a state of uninterrupted happiness. But that's not real freedom. Real freedom comes when you no longer feel enslaved by your emotions, when you can experience them fully without being ruled by them. It is the ability to act in alignment with your values and choices regardless of whether your emotions support you in that moment or not. When fear rises, you acknowledge it but still take the step forward. When anger flares, you notice it but choose patience. When sadness pulls at you, you allow it but continue moving. That is what true freedom looks like. Not the absence of emotion, but mastery over it. Think about how often emotions dictate people's lives without them realizing it. Fear stops someone from pursuing a new career path. Anger ruins a relationship in a single argument. Laziness convinces someone to waste years avoiding their potential. Sadness convinces another that nothing will ever change. In these cases, emotions are in control and the person becomes a prisoner. They may not see the bars, but they live within them every day. Every decision, every reaction, every direction is filtered through the fleeting lens of how I feel right now. That's not freedom, that's slavery to emotion. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine someone who feels fear before a presentation but gives it anyway. Someone who feels anger in a disagreement but chooses to listen instead of shouting. Someone who feels the weight of sadness but still shows up for the people who depend on them. These are acts of freedom. The person is not pretending emotions don't exist, they feel them fully, but they do not let those emotions control the outcome. They recognize that feelings are temporary, but choices create lasting results. This kind of freedom doesn't come naturally. It takes practice. It requires pausing long enough to see emotions for what they are and not blindly reacting to them. It requires reminding yourself of your values when emotions try to pull you away from them. It requires the courage to act when every part of your body wants to retreat. It is not easy, but it is worth it because it gives you ownership of your life. No longer are you waiting for the perfect mood to take action. No longer are you abandoning commitments the moment discomfort arises. No longer are you reactive to every emotional shift. Instead, you become steady, consistent, and unshakable even as emotions rise and fall around you. This mastery also changes how you experience emotions themselves. When you stop treating them as commands, they lose much of their power to overwhelm you. Fear becomes a signpost instead of a prison. Anger becomes a signal instead of an explosion. Sadness becomes a depth of meaning instead of a hole you can't climb out of. By no longer trusting every emotion as truth, you actually gain the ability to appreciate them more deeply because they no longer threaten to take over your life. You can experience them fully without drowning in them. Real freedom is the strength to live beyond the pull of emotional weather. It is the ability to keep walking when storms come, to keep choosing when moods shift, and to keep building a life based not on what you feel moment to moment, but on who you want to be in the long run. That is why freedom doesn't come from eliminating emotions. It comes from mastering them so that you use them as tools instead of letting them use you.